me hand you over to Mark Rushton, our guest speaker for today, who will be taking us through root cause learning. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Gary. That's brilliant. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you all on this quite sunny Tuesday morning up here in the northeast of Scotland in Aberdeen. I won't ask where everybody is. I'd imagine a lot of you are working remotely at the moment, but it's a great pleasure to be presenting to you this morning. I hadn't realised I was going to be the first one, so I'll try to make it as upbeat and as interesting as I can. I'm quite happy to be interrupted as I go through my presentation this morning, and if not, I'm quite happy to have a more formal Q&A at the end. But Gary, if I understand rightly, you're gonna watch out for hands going up and things like that as we go through the session.
I am indeed.
So brilliant, thank you. So firstly, let me introduce myself. I'm Mark Rushton. I am CEO with an organisation called STC and CISO. And I suppose our mission in life is as problem solvers. We get involved in industries and organizations in different parts of the world to help them either control their risk or understand what's going wrong in their world, or to help them realize opportunity as a result of them growing or expanding or opening a new division or launching a new product or whatever it might be. And in that varied and often very exciting lifestyle that we lead, a big part of what we do is in and around helping organizations with incident prevention. So incident investigation, root cause analysis, the implementation of preventive actions, and basically strategies to ensure that bad events won't recur in similar circumstances again, and actually moving on from that so that they can understand what good looks like and be able to replicate good. So in order to be able to do that, there are some fundamentals that we need to kind of understand. And in the world of incidents, unplanned events, even in the world of industry, or indeed in the world of criminal investigation, there is no real point in understanding the what if you don't understand the why, and there's no real point in understanding the why unless you're able to implement the fix. So that's a real kind of fundamental thing here, and I'm going to declare my hand at this point and say that our background in this is very much well, prior to the last 10 years, has been very much in the criminal investigation space. So our chief operating officer was a very senior detective, and 7 of our team similar backgrounds. So they historically were very, very passionate about finding out who the bad guy or the bad girl was, making sure they couldn't commit the crime again, and moving on. And that always had an inbuilt frustration, because that frustration was always, well, we've got the what, we've got the how, we've gathered the evidence, and we've made the bad person or persons difficult in terms of their ability to go and harm anyone again, because they're either in prison or they're being rehabilitated or whatever the case may be. However, we never quite got to that why. Why did that person do it? Why did that event happen? Why did that situation occur? And so these guys came into my world around a decade ago, and we began to explore that in a lot more detail through a product that we jointly developed. So what I want to do today is talk about root causes. Talk about root causes a lot. Now that can sound very dry, but we'll try and bring that to life, and to talk about it in the context of not just those single events that happen in organizations of all shapes and sizes, but how that transition from single event to kind of macro understanding can help us truly achieve root cause learning. And I want to do this in the context of not yet having all the answers, because we're part of a really interesting learning journey right now around how we can make that reality of root cause learning a norm for every organization. Now, we've done it in small situations and in individual company situations, but we want to look at this across what it could look like in a whole framework. So I'm going to walk you through what we mean by root causes, the habits that root causes have, and how we can learn from those habits and how we can make ourselves safer, more efficient, and more profitable as a result of understanding those things. Okay, so that's the aim of the next 30 minutes or so, and then we can hopefully have a bit of a Q&A. So first of all, let me screen share and bring up a bit of a backdrop that we can use to walk ourselves through the topic. So I'll ask you, Gary, so as not to interrupt anyone else, is my screen now visible to everyone?
It is, yes.
That's brilliant, thank you. So let's try complete the picture. So what I firstly want to do is dispel a few myths and try and paint a bit of an industrial reality to root causes in the way in which they manifest themselves. And there are three core truths that underpin our approach here, and our approach is called COMET, and we'll come to that in a few minutes. And I'll use COMET as a bit of a backdrop to explain some of the things I want to kind of walk through. But there are three core truths here that if you buy into them and if you understand them and are able to see them in reality, you've got a much higher chance of achieving that status of having root cause learning and being able to prevent recurrence of bad events and inefficiencies within your own world. And the first of these is that root causes never ever occur in isolation. And what I mean by that is that there is no such thing as a silver bullet. And it's very common in many industries that organizations task their HSEQ professionals with trying to get to that primary thing, that silver bullet, that underlying cause as to why something happened. Well, in 350 odd years of combined investigative experience, we've never once come across an incident that was down to just one thing. Okay, root causes occur in clusters, and those clusters, if you understand them, can give you a whole world of insight, but you've got to be able to understand the behavior of those root causes within the clusters and why they occur the way they do. So the idea of a silver bullet, that's out. That's the first one. The second thing is that, and this is maybe slightly more obvious, but again, it's easy to miss, root causes never have and will never respect a hierarchy of seriousness. So the root cause that manifests itself in you or I cutting a finger can be the very same root causes that manifest themselves in us losing a hand. The same situation occurs in the world of quality. A root cause that results in a £10,000 production loss or inefficiency or process breakdown can be the very same root cause that in different circumstances manifests itself in a £1 million loss. Circumstances are different, you know, the situation's different, luck can often be different, but the underlying root causes are the same. And so one of the really important things about this discipline is if you can get into the habit of capturing root causes and addressing them when the consequences are minor, or ideally when the consequences aren't anything, i.e. at the point of near misses or proactive assurance and observation activity, you will significantly lessen the chances of something much more significant happening. And you can take any major industrial incident of the last 20, 30 years that I'm sure many of you have got some insight of, and you can begin to pick that apart from a root cause analysis perspective, and you will find that there were lots of little things which ultimately led to the big thing happening. And those little things, if captured further down the pyramid, would have certainly lessened, if not stopped, the impact of that big thing happening. So that second truth is very important. And the third one, and the one which is probably the most difficult for organizations to get their head around, is that root causes don't change based on failure type. Okay, so a root cause that manifests itself in a safety or a health outcome, i.e. an injury or a breakdown of some kind, can be the very same root cause that manifests itself in an equipment failure, an environmental spill, or an organization's quality or non-conformance related activity that might result in a significant monetary loss. What changes very much around that is the safe system of work, the control of work, the hazards, the targets, the barriers, the control measures, all the things that you put in place as organizations and projects to keep your organization away from those particular risks and those particular harm. But ultimately, the root causes that underpin them are exactly the same. And if you can have all those three things lined up in your organization, then you've got a fantastic chance of being able to understand the much bigger picture that ultimately your organization enables you to present. Okay, so those are our truths that we're going to walk through today. And so think about root cause analysis beyond HSE. Health, safety, environment is ultimately unequivocal. Safety comes above anything else. However, in the boardroom of most organizations, in the policy rooms of most government organizations, it's the same thing too around quality, around business, around projects. Failure, loss of public money, loss of private money, loss of margin, loss of profit, all of that stuff is as important to the success and failure of the organization. And the best way of kind of wrapping that around something that everyone can kind of get their head around is, if organizations are inefficient and lose lots of money through making mistakes that don't result in injury, ultimately people will lose their jobs, and that has an equally detrimental harm on the human being as well. So keeping a healthy business and keeping root causes in check is a spectrum thing. It's not just something that you pigeonhole into your health and safety and your environment. Okay, so here's what we're trying to get to here, to get to this root cause learning situation. There are lots of things that you do in your lives which are proactive, and thankfully 90% plus of the time most of us get that right, and that's to everyone's great credit. So you do things which will ultimately reveal leading indicators. These are things around audit, inspection, assurance, health checks, project reviews, looking at work insights, work imagined versus work done, and so on and so forth. And ultimately, those leading indicators, they're in that blue space because they're keeping you safe. And they will identify root causes in a dormant state, i.e. before they've come and bitten you, and before they've either exhibited themselves with consequence or nearly with consequence through near misses. So those are things that are very proactive, and those leading indicators are really, really important. And then there's all the stuff that goes on the other side. When something actually does go wrong, our reactive strategy becomes particularly important. How do we manage an incident? How do we investigate it? How do we understand near misses, which are our biggest precursors to live events with consequence happening? How do we deal with regulatory intervention when it comes along? How do we deal with project failures when they happen? How do we sort out our disputes with contractors? I'm active in the HS2 project just now, and it's incredible sitting in the middle of a relationship between a principal contractor and the client. It's just amazing how these things happen and how you need to manage them, how you have to make sure you've got a consistent view for the greater good of the project, and so on and so forth. How do you manage your non-conformances? And when the worst thing happens, how does an organization navigate its way through the inevitable prosecution that will come along? And those are active root causes. Those are things that have come along and they've actually exhibited consequence. And so if we're able to marry those two things up, truly marry them up, and understand the yin and the yang, if you like, of the two of them together, there should be some things that we can do to get to root cause learning at the end. And the first one is, regardless of where we are in the world now, technology has a role to play. We need to be joined up in terms of where all this technology sits and what it tells us. Secondly, we need to have a means of analysing it all, and that means needs to be the same on the blue side as on the red side. Otherwise, you're not going to be comparing apples with apples, and it's going to be extremely difficult to do that. Thirdly, we're all, I'm sure, very fair, very reasonable human beings on this call just now. We all probably believe in good. We all probably believe in a no blame culture. In order to get to that point where you've got a no blame culture, human factors is another thing that we absolutely have to analyze within this. Human beings make mistakes, but human beings, in the most part, don't make mistakes intentionally. So we need to understand the underlying reasons for that human error so we can phase it out in this learning. And then, of course, we have to be able to understand it all by understanding the big data that our taxonomy gives us. And then finally, how can we profile risk based on that? So if I'm doing an excavation or I'm doing some scaffolding or whatever it might be, how do I know all the lessons that have happened in my organization when I've been doing groundworks or excavation or scaffolding before? All of that stuff's very important. And if you can channel all that in to an output, we should be able to get to this kind of holy grail of a single truth where we get root cause learning across our organization. Not an easy thing to do. If it was easy, we'd have all done it a long time ago, but ultimately that's where we need to be able to get to. Okay, so firstly, around joined up technology. I'm not going to, this is our technology. It's not all built yet, and I'm not going to go and do a sales pitch on our product. I just want to explain the importance of having technology that is joined up in this space. So typically in any organization, there will be a means of recording, classifying, and reporting observations, near misses, incidents, and indeed positive proactive assurance activities. So you're always going to have a channel where things come in. You're going to have a means of investigating, analysing, allocating actions to incidents when they happen, and you're going to want to track and close those out. But the key thing is around this technology being joined up is that on this left-hand side, you've got my right-hand side here, maybe your left-hand side, depending on what screen you're looking at, you will have a bunch of things that are in that responsive phase, things that happen because there's been an event or there's been a near miss. And then on the other side, you will have a bunch of things here which are deployed because you are looking at proactive leading indicator stuff, audit, assurance, inspection, looking at AI and big data, and looking at what your organization's untapped, unstructured data is telling you. And then out the back end of all of that, you're going to have a means of actually communicating it all. You need to have a means of taking all of that data that you're beginning to generate and either connecting it to Power BI or Tableau or something like that, or creating a dashboard yourselves that you can then go and communicate this back to the organization from. So technology needs to be joined up. This bit here on this side ultimately needs to talk to this bit here on this side in order to get the right outcomes that will give you that complete root cause learning picture. Okay, so that's very important. But probably most important of all is to have some kind of taxonomy that allows you to understand not just the root causes associated with a single event, but the root causes that manifest themselves right across your function or your organization's performance. And we've come up with a tool called COMET, and I'm not going to go into to how you use COMET today, but I want to just use the acronym as a means of explaining how you build a taxonomy. Now, we partner with Lloyd's Register in London and with Cummins in the US and McDermott in Indonesia, and these organizations sometimes have their own taxonomy for different things, and sometimes they use ours, but they always have a taxonomy under which everything else can start to be structured. And this is really, really important in getting to any kind of sense in terms of your bigger data, as I'll show in a minute. So COMET, communication, operating environment, management, equipment, and training, bounds the spectrum of organizational root cause. So for us, we've spent over a decade researching where businesses, public and private, have root causes, and they all can be mapped into one or more of those 5 categories. And then what you're able to do is begin to drill that down to start to help people and organizations to understand the granularity that sits below those parent categories. So yes, we've got communication, but what about the subcategories? Well, we've got written communication and we've got verbal communication. What about in our management system? Well, we've got a cluster here that looks at supervision. We've got a cluster that looks at task planning, preparation, resourcing. We've got one here that looks at inadequate accountability for policy and procedure. And we've got one at the bottom there that looks very closely at failures to adhere to opportunities for improvement that were previously highlighted but missed. So maybe you've done a root cause analysis before, but you've not actually learned from it. So these things all begin to be mined down. So you've got 12 subcategories here, which are reflective of their 5 parents. And again, that's, to use a phrase that we use a lot, that's helping you eat the elephant. It's helping you get that kind of granularity and detail at the level you need it. And then nestled below that, we have 62 root causes. Now, what's very important here is not that we've got 62 root causes, it's that we've got 62 coded root causes. And by having these little codes, you start to paint a DNA. Every time you do a root cause analysis and you land on a cluster of root causes, those codes begin to aggregate, they begin to tell you a story. And that story begins to give you an outcome at an organizational level. This is the importance of having a taxonomy. And then this human factor piece is very important. And I'm gonna kind of steal the thunder a little bit of the UK Health and Safety Executive here, because, and again, we had a situation a few years ago now where one of our investigations was audited by the HSE on behalf of a major client of ours. And the outcome was that the investigation was very robust, it was very deep, it had a lot of rigor, but it didn't pay nearly enough attention to human factors. And so we set about developing a project alongside the HSE and that client and a human factors expert to try and deliver something that would begin to take an understanding of the human error into root cause analysis. And for any of you who are in organizations that have a just and fair culture, this is absolutely key to increasing reporting, giving people confidence that they're not going to be blamed, and giving them confidence that the organisation is going to get to outcomes that's going to prevent recurrence of events again. And I want to just in 2 minutes walk you through a very simple model here called the IDA model. It's not it's embedded in our tool, but it's IP that others use as well. And it looks at the human error, and it says, did that human error occur at the information stage of the task, i.e. was it a failure to perceive or understand or forecast anything? And if it was, the tool will lead you into a bunch of performance influencing factors around the job, the individual and the organisation, and these are the HSE's own, which may or may not have influenced the human error. You'll get the detail from your investigation, obviously, but any of the ones that come out here with a high impact, they get taken into root cause analysis. If the failure wasn't at the information stage, was it at the decision stage? So was it a mistake, a simple mistake, or was it a routine deviation, something that was done all the time? Was it a situational deviation that occurred within that given situation? Or very rarely was it a malicious violation? Again, you take your conclusion. If the answer is there, you stop there and you go into those PIFs to take out the most relevant ones. And if the error wasn't at the decision stage, then obviously it must have been at the action stage. So was it a lapse or a slip? And again, when you've selected which it was, you can go in and you can explore the things that are most relevant. And typically, the ratio of a ratio of about 3 to 1, we often find that organisation and job factors outweigh the individual factors within common investigations. In other words, the human error occurred because of the regime that the human was working in. And so to get to that fairness and take that into root cause analysis is very, very important. Even if it's individual errors around fatigue or work overload, whatever it might be, you still understand from the other influencing factors why there was fatigue or why there was a work overload situation, and so on and so forth. And then, surprise, surprise, when you do that, large frameworks, large organizations can really start to tick a key box in delivering their just and fair culture model, i.e. individuals can see that there's going to be a process that goes through here, which is not subject to confirmation bias or not subject to blame, that will get to the underlying reasons as to why us humans are not infallible. Okay, the next part of this is around big data. So remember those little codes, they're really important. So what about if we could gather hundreds of failure points, even thousands of them, and analyze them in a consistent way? And that would maybe help us understand the systemic causes that drive these incidents and ultimately be able to prioritize and prevent them from happening again. This is the fundamental part around achieving a kind of root cause learning status. And we call it the 2080 rule. So we know that in any of your respective organizations, there will be 20% approximately of bad actors that give you 80% of your pain. Might be 1585, it might be 2575, but broadly the 2080 rule will apply. So if you're able to understand those 20% and understand how to isolate and prioritize and fix them, you will get uplift right across your organization that will allow you then to go and get after some more of the maverick ones. So it's those systemic ones, the ones that occur again, 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 and again. You can't get them to go away. Address those first. Suddenly the sky becomes clearer and you get much more insight around how you can get after the others. And these little codes that we've got, and you can set up similar taxonomies yourselves as well, they start to tell a story. And so you can look at top level data much more effectively. You can look at incident types more effectively and look at what the most systemic causes were associated with each: safety, environment, quality, security, business, and so on and so forth. You can compare different parts of your project. So I don't know, in the world of Network Rail or HS2, you might be comparing work packs. In the world of an offshore asset, you might be comparing asset A versus asset B. In a maritime environment, you might be looking across a fleet of 25 supply vessels. Whatever it might be, you can start to compare and understand where you've got commonality and understand where you've got things that are maybe a little bit more maverick to one particular asset or project. And then you've also got within this the ability to start to cluster these causes, to understand again how these clusters behave. And you can see by looking at where they occur together, you can begin to get some automated commentary from processes like this. So this little cluster here is telling me that there was poor resourcing and preparation of tasks, often due to confusing documentation and processes. That resulted in a failure to adhere to the process, which was exacerbated by a poor safety culture. And even if teams did want to improve, the training to do so wasn't available. So that's without going into any detail. Just that root cause descriptors pulled together starts to paint a little bit of a picture. So you're really getting into already insight that you maybe wouldn't have previously had if you were going after that silver bullet, that one root cause. So these clusters start to tell a very important story. That then enables you to start to say, well, I can risk profile. I can then start to say, well, if I'm going to be doing scaffolding or welding or transportation or whatever it is I'm doing, that's maybe a little bit construction bias on this particular slide, I should be able to pull out intelligence from my system, from my proactive assurance activity and my reactive investigation activity that starts to tell me where I'm likely to have pain when I go and do this high risk activity again. Now, some organizations already treat themselves as if they're in a major hazard, accident hazard environment. Some don't, but need to, and some don't because they're not. But for those that are in amongst these high risk activities, it's fundamentally important that you're able to understand the DNA of where these activities might hurt you before you step into that environment again. I could barely count on fingers, toes, arms, legs, anything, the amount of senior project directors that have said to me over the years, why do we keep allowing these things to happen again? I'm involved in a situation just now where the HSE have just delivered 2 prohibition notices on a project because 8 dumper trucks have overturned. And they haven't learned from the previous 7 because the system and the ability to understand this profiling is not joined up. And it frustrates the life out of us that this intelligence isn't brought together. So this profiling is fundamental to where we need to get to be able to understand how to eliminate these things all the time before the bad event happens. We still injure too many people, we still kill too many people, we still waste too much money. And getting to this kind of holy grail of profiling will help us massively get to that point of root cause learning. We need to have detail as well in the reports that we produce. So it's very important that whatever technology we use produces an outcome which contains all of that detail. There must be no duplication of data within that detail so that human beings want to come back and engage in something like this again. So the individual reports are very important in the process, but so are the macro reports, the things that begin to tell senior people that can make strategic decisions what they need to do to go and make things a little bit better. And we're very proud to be working with Maestrigados and HS2 at the moment. And the very high level monthly reporting that we're able to produce is no more than 2 pages. We've got this principle within organizational learning that give people detail at the point they need it. Give the HSE manager and his or her team all of the detail that they need to go and implement individual granular preventive actions. But at a very high level, give very senior stakeholders the detail at the point that they need to see it so they can understand some commentary very quickly, some numbers, some clusters, some influencing factors, and they can go away and they can act on that within the sphere of influence that they've got and the level of detail that they've got. Not everyone likes to consume information in the same way, but one thing is for sure, the concept of the single field of view is very, very powerful in helping organizations get to that point where they get proper root cause learning coming out the other side. So that the individual and the macro are very important, and they must aggregate as well, so that as the data set becomes bigger, the learning and the insight becomes much, much bigger that sits with it. That's really important as well. Okay, so how does that help us get to root cause learning? So in conclusion, if we can isolate and address our systemic causation, first of all, so get at the things which are either causing you disproportionate pain or are so systemic that they are low-hanging fruit, and act on it, execute it so that you've addressed that bundle of pain that you've got. Do that 20-80 rule. Then take that incident reduction and take it into leading indicator-led improvement. So analyze the proactive and the reactive activities consistently. And what that means is, if you have priority audit findings, priority assurance findings that perhaps give you cause for concern, use a taxonomy like the one I've demonstrated to go and do some analysis of it to begin to understand what those outcomes look like in their leading indicator state. And we're currently building a piece of kit that connects all that together, and we're really excited about where that's going. And then also identify your causation in low-level events. So don't treat them any differently because the consequences have been lighter. Granted, don't roll out a team of 10 people and spend 2 weeks analysing something that involved a simple slip or a trip or a fall. But get someone to be able to understand the event, apply that same taxonomy, albeit in a lighter way, and get those root causes before they ever become something much more significant. That's really key to implementing a root cause learning culture. And then have the ability to risk profile the things that typically cause you pain before they start. So lessons learned applied every time. This is really, really important in this. How do we take these things that continually cause us pain and have a proper profiling going on before we ever set about doing them? And then the hardest thing of all within that is, how do we share that profile so that we're not looking at it as a JV or as a project or as an asset or as a team, but we're looking at it through a set of lenses that allows the whole organization or the whole project to understand it and learn from it. So in other words, we're signposting things to a much wider audience, regardless of individual company or individual competitive situation or political persuasion or whatever it might be. Let's get that learning out. No one competes on safety. We need to all do it. And then finally, we need to implement really smart preventive actions when we say we will. It's easy with a good system to create good actions. It's much harder to implement them along a timeline that was promised. And if we don't do that, those commitments are quickly undermined. And if they're undermined, people will be far more reticent about going back and wanting to do it again. And I've been involved in projects where I've gone into systems where there's sometimes been hundreds of preventive actions, and they sit there in a holding pen and they hardly ever see the light of day. And eventually the enthusiasm to want to go back to the start of the process and understand bad events or potential for bad events begins to diminish, and you lose a whole lot of goodwill and a whole lot of buy-in. So this is not easy, but with the right proportion of people and technology, it is infinitely achievable. And I'm very, very excited about where the next 5 years in this space are going to go as we go into Industry 4.0. The tolerance of recurrence of failure is becoming far, far less. We're machining out a lot of opportunity for human error, but that brings in a lot of opportunity for machine error or use of machine error. So this stuff's not going to go away. It's going to change its profile, but ultimately the next 5 years are going to be extremely exciting in seeing where we go in terms of ultimately reducing risk around significant events from harming us. So that's been hopefully useful. I've got a little bit of a call to action before I allow 10 minutes for questions. But if you do want to confidentially share an incident report with us, we'll be happy to complete it and record an analysis of it and give you a video. No obligation, no cost, just to satisfy curiosity. But if you wanted to give us an opportunity to apply all of that thinking to something that's happened in your world, we'd be happy to do that, video it, and give you it back as a learning or resources tool going forward. So I think, Gary, that's probably enough from me. And if we can open the floor up, that would be brilliant.
Wonderful, great. We've had a couple of questions. I'll read them out unless somebody wishes to put their hand up and actually speak out. If they wish to, just let me know. But I'm going to take it from the top. At the moment, Maria asked, is the root cause model suitable for adaptation at project, program, and organizational level?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not only is it adaptable, it's essential. It's essential that an organization doesn't just look at root causes in a selected area of its existence. Root causes manifest themselves in the boardroom, they manifest themselves on project sites, they manifest themselves within the organization's support functions. The organization needs to collectively learn together. And so having an understanding of that organizational spectrum is ultimately where you'll get the most learning. So 100% that's the case.
Okay, and we have a hand up. Mark, do you want to speak out?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Cheers, Mark. Nice to meet you.
You too.
Thanks for the presentation, been really useful. I've been involved in root cause analysis of incidents in the past. Sort of, I know there's a lot of different systems out there. You know, you've got the fishtail, you know, the why. I work on my personal belief is that if you keep on asking why, you haven't got the root cause.
Correct.
You need to keep going on and on. And I find it quite frustrating that people. One thing that people put down is human behaviour, which I don't like at all, because I don't believe that human behaviour is a root cause. As you've emphasised things like that. I was just saying, you know, it's about to emphasise that when you're doing a root cause analysis, don't just do the 5 whys, which has been done in the past. You know, just keep delving until you can't answer them. You can't ask why anymore.
That's a very good point. I mean, 5 whys has got its place and had its place, but the problems around it are threefold. One, that you're absolutely right. You can ask why until I find out what colour of socks you had on a particular day, Mark, but that's not useful to me. I'm not transitioning that root cause to an action at the point it's actually going to benefit the business. Secondly, that whether we like it or not, we're all human beings, and as investigators, it's very difficult sometimes to avoid confirmation bias, and often investigators go into a 5 whys already with an idea in their head what happened or why it happened, and they go and reinforce that using the 5 whys. So that's difficult as well. But most importantly of all, it doesn't have a taxonomy. So it doesn't provide a structure for these things to start to tell a bigger story. It's open-ended in every case. And so it's very difficult for organizations to capture what a 5 whys led approach is telling them across a whole business. You need an approach that gives you that framework and structure to get that learning. So that's the biggest barrier it has, is it just doesn't have a taxonomy or a framework.
Just as another question from Hannah, from Mark's experience, how would he estimate that using a system like COMET would reduce the likelihood of having a major incident in an organization undertaking construction activities? Quite a long one there.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question, and I need to be honest and be as objective as I can be here. So the one issue, COMET undoubtedly reduces incident severity and frequency if implemented and used over a period of time. But I think I maybe even saw something flash up on the screen there. The problem with COMET and with any other system is it's only useful from the day you turn it on. And so it gathers information from the day you turn it on. There is already in your respective worlds a whole mass of unstructured knowledge, data, insight that's hidden within that you don't have to bring to the fore, but there will be insight that will allow you to implement improvement strategies within that. And we've recognized that. We've been working with Lloyd's Register to develop COMET's presence in the world of AI, so we can use machine learning to go and analyze hundreds and thousands of incident and HSE reports to tap into insights that lie within the natural language. But the biggest barrier to that success is that these systems only gather intelligence from the day you turn them on. Now, 90% of the throughput of HSE related information that you have as organizations is in the proactive space, thankfully, because guess what? You're all really good at what you do, and you all work for successful organizations, I'm sure. And these things can never be bought or implemented on a negative. It has to be seen as an investment in something positive. So if you can capture, using an analytics tool like this, all the proactive stuff that's coming through, which gives you so much insight day to day, because we have to audit, we have to assure, we have to inspect, we have to observe all of those things. And then the 10% of throughput that comes from investigations and root cause analysis and things like that, then you get to that level of data much more quickly, that gives you the insight to go and put in the strategies that will stop bad events from happening. But Hannah, I think the biggest thing within that is treat the minor as if it were significant, but proportionately. So don't paralyze yourselves, but treat it in such a way that you're capturing that causation long before the very bad thing happens. That's a great starting point.
Great. There was one final question, but you may have just covered it from Gordon. Gordon, do you want to raise it, or do you want me to read through? Okay.
Happy to talk it through.
Yep.
I think one of the things we always suffer from within the organisation that we work on is actually standardisation, and we kind of go off in a certain direction, and then the next great initiative comes up, and that means that we have to switch course, which affects the type of data and the quality of the data that we collect.
Yeah.
So my question is really about how much time, in your experience, and I know this is how long is a piece of string, clearly, but on average, when we start implementing a system like this, how long does it take it to get it up and running and make sure that all the data flows are correct? And then how long do you run it for before you can start using that data collected proactively to feed back in, or is it instantaneous, as you say?
There's two parts to that question, and it's a great question. So firstly, the time to integrate something like this is very much dependent on the organization it's going into and what their IT barriers are. The world's now gone cloud, which is really good. So there's less behind an organization's firewall. Everything's MS Azure, so it's all encrypted in London, which is really good. So that can take, I'd say, up to 8 weeks thereabouts. But the value of the system of a system that's gathering from the day it's turned on, I mean, it can be in month 1. If you have 7-8 events and you identify from those 7-8 events that you've got 5 systemic root causes that you can go and get at, then you've probably got value from month 1. Others, it just depends. I noticed in your insight there, you spoke about Piper Alpha. I mean, I'm up here in Aberdeen. My background's oil and gas, and Alan, our COO, was the first officer on Piper Bravo the day Piper Alpha exploded. And Piper Alpha has been a huge part of our world, but you're absolutely right. There were 7 or 8 errors on that day that accumulated to lead to that platform exploding and nearly 200 men losing their lives. So it's a significant case study that we work with. But yeah, that's another good example.
Wonderful there, Mark. I think we're just about to draw to a close. So for the last few minutes, is there anything you'd like to say? And then I just end with a ending address.
No, apologies. It was a little bit rushed, guys. I needed to get through a fair bit in a short space of time. But if anyone wants to follow up or take us up on our call to action, then please do. We'd be delighted to share what we've got, and non-commercially as well. If anyone wants any advice or insight, I'd be very happy to spend some time with them with no agenda at all, just to share some of the ongoing experience that we're gaining at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Mark. So thank you everybody for attending today's session. Just wish to draw your attention to a link in the chat around the SharePoint site for future sessions, and I'm also just depositing at a glance to give everybody a quick idea of what's going on for the rest of the week and next week. Still many spaces open for many of the sessions. So on that behalf, thank you everybody, and take care. Have a great day.
Thanks. All the best.
Bye-bye.